right, I think I figured out how to label this, and I think we got the volume correct. My video's a little laggy. Just make sure. That's better, kind of. All right, let me close the door real quick. Okay. All right, and I apologize in advance if I cough or sneeze a little bit. I am slightly under the weather. My name is Saxon, everybody. I am the camera host. I've been hosting this class for a couple of years now. Since the last time you might have attended a class, we have recently had a little bit of an update with the camera and microphone system, so I should sound better and hopefully look somewhat better. Anywho, let's get into today's class. Today is our camera basics presentation. Let me pull this up for us. Perfect. Okay, just want to make sure it all looks good. So, as always, people, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns while we're talking, feel free to chat in the group or in the live chat there, and I'll answer your question live. But today is the intro to cameras, or camera basics, as a lot of people like to call it. And what are we talking about in this class? Well, this class is really meant to be your entry level or your rudimentary class to start getting into cameras. Now, you could be a brand new user, someone who's never purchased a camera, who's looking for one. You could be someone who already owns a camera, but maybe it's been a few years since you've picked it up. You could also be someone who's an avid shooter, but maybe you're a little bit behind the times, or maybe you just need a complete refresh, or you're brand new to this thing. Whatever your case might be, this is the perfect class to get started in. Today, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, but what I want to bestow upon you and what I really hope you get out of this is the idea of upgrading from a cell phone, from an entry-level camera, into something that is either an intermediate or an advanced camera or a true beginner's camera to get you away from, the entry-level products. The goal is to graduate from your smartphone, as I like to call this one. Also, I will be periodically sipping some water here because it is, a little congested. I think that's the biggest thing. So if I sound a little nasally, you know why. All right. I just want to make sure this is all going. So where to go when all else fails for help? I have a bunch of different resources up here, but Owner's Manual is first and foremost on there, guys. If you are brand new to this and you're just buying this camera, you take it out of the box. I think it'd be silly not to at least look over the manual, figure out what things are, where they're at, and just have it on hand. Keep it in your camera bag. It's a simple thing, but for the most part, if you don't know how to look something up about, what could be troubleshooting or wrong with your camera, your book should make it very simple for you to find those. Imaging Resource is another one that a customer recommended to me years ago. It's a camera resource for kind of like a Reddit or a subfeed where people might have information or questions about cameras, and camera nerds or specialists will come on and they'll answer those questions, and they create it as like a forum-style answering system. If you're really into that and you're really into cameras in general, they do have a podcast, which I've tried to listen to myself. It's very numbers, spec, and detail-oriented. It's not necessarily about, what camera is being rated the best. It's that this camera has X amount of megapixels per its sensor versus this model, which is lacking in certain areas. So it's kind of a mixed bag, if you will. Canon, Nikon, and Sony all have dedicated websites to their products, and they also talk a lot about the kind of basics on cameras. Nikon's one of my favorite. They have a really cool interactive slide where you can actually play with focal length to understand depth of field control and then background to foreground separation. And my personal favorite, what we're on currently right now, YouTube. I can't thank YouTube enough for what it does. There's anything that you want to learn. If you can't learn it on YouTube, then you probably don't need to learn it, is what I joke with customers about. I recently redid all my plumbing in my basement bathroom, and knock on wood, for the last 2 years, there's been no leaks, no nothing. Everything's been perfect. So if all else fails, it's so simple. Just type in your camera model, things you want to maybe know about it, and from there you should find tons of different options and things that you can learn and discover. And pardon me, I think there's some napkins in one of those drawers. My nose. I don't see any here. All right, I might have to get some form. Oh, actually, hold on. I knew it. Oh, maybe I lied. One moment, everybody. There we go. All right. Let me look away for a second. So, with that out of the way, there are tons of different types of cameras that you can look into, but the three most important ones that you'll see on the main market today are the DSLR, mirrorless, point-and-shoot cameras, but they also go by bridge, and we'll start to break those down. DSLR is the old technology, digital single lens reflex, meaning on the inside of your camera there is a mirror, and we'll talk a little bit about the difference between mirrorless and DSLR after this. Mirrorless is the next one, and it kind of implies in the name it does not have a mirror. So unlike its DSLR counterpart, there is no mirror in that camera. Lastly, point and shoot and bridge cameras are also extremely popular. Point and shoot and bridge model is going to be the type of camera that is a more middle ground of what we're talking about here. So point and shoot camera, hi there, have a seat. The point and shoot camera or bridge camera is kind of the in-between of the other two cameras. Doesn't require lens changing, and it's a nice starting point if you're getting into cameras. The other reason they call it a bridge camera is because it does bridge the gap between cell phone and the interchangeable lens series like DSLR and mirrorless. So point and shoot, bridge, that's where it gets its name from. Point and shoot meaning that you can just simply point and shoot. The bridge going off the fact that it kind of bridges the gap between your lensed cameras. Kids Kidding 22. Hello there. Nice to meet you. Going forward, welcome in.
Thank you.
We just started. This is like the third slide, so you didn't miss anything. So I talked a little bit about it, but mirrorless versus DSLR. Why does that matter? Why should you care? If you're brand new and you're getting ready to purchase a camera or you're thinking about it, this is a good thing to look at. Point and shoot cameras or bridge cameras are fantastic because you don't need to interchange lenses on there. They're an all-in-one system, but they can be limiting. And that's why mirrorless and DSLRs exist, because they have this nice interchangeable lens system, meaning that depending on what you're shooting, where you're shooting, the quality of what you're shooting, you can change a lens and put something on that's appropriate for the setting you're in. While both of these cameras are very similar, the DSLR is the older technology. If you're getting into photography for the first time, and you want to get something that's maybe a little entry level that you can save money on, you can find plenty of used DSLRs on the market. They're fantastic cameras. Lenses are still being made for them. But as I've warned customers in the past couple years, slowly but surely manufacturers are discontinuing them, and they're moving all to the mirrorless technology, which for the most part is all you're going to see on the new camera market. Where are mirrorless and DSLRs different? DSLRs have the mirror on the inside of the camera, meaning in the realm of photography, light penetrates the light, bounces off the mirror, and then comes through the pentaprism for you to view it through the optical viewfinder. If you ever shot with film or anything in that nature, you're familiar with this style. The way that it would then work is the mirror would flick itself upwards, and then the image would burn into the camera's sensor or onto film if you had that style of camera. Mirrorless, which I would say has been around for quite some time, but the technology in the last 5 or 6 years has really blown up and become amazing. Light comes in, it hits the image sensor, and the only thing stopping it is the shutter. At this point now, the camera's advanced enough that it sends the image to the electronic viewfinder. Now, why any of that matters is because of weight and size. DSLRs versus mirrorless are extremely bulky, clunky. The mirrorless technology made the cameras skinnier, lighter, smaller. On top of that too, the image quality on mirrorless is fantastic. Low light performance, if you're shooting at the nighttime or you have darker scenes that you're working with, are also fantastic too. So again, depending on your budget, where you're at, mirrorless can range anywhere in price range from, I'd say, entry level could go from $399, $499 area, and they can spike all the way into multiple thousands. The DSLR cameras, because you'll most likely find more used, can range anywhere in price point, so it just kind of depends. Also, would you like you have a water bottle, I was going to say.
Thank you.
Not a problem. And if there's anything that comes up, feel free to ask at any point in time. Same thing for anybody watching online. If there's anything you want to chat and ask a question about, I'll answer that live for you. So jumping away from that for just a minute before we get back into cameras and kind of the button layouts, what everything does, memory cards are the next big thing to talk about. So where do your pictures go? And then on top of that, make sure you have 2 of them. Now, memory cards in this case, we are looking at the standard SD card. And you'll see that written on the actual card. It'll usually say SDXC or SDHC. SDHC is an older tech. Older models of cameras, I would say at least 10 years plus, relied on that technology. Again, it just kind of depends on the model. It's not necessarily that important anymore. If you're buying a camera that is in the more modern sense, I'd say that's 10 years or newer, then SDXC will work just fine for you. It's the standard card. But the reason this is extremely important is because when you first buy a camera, it comes with 0 storage. The reason being is that the camera manufacturers expect you to purchase your storage separately to make sure you get something that's appropriate for you, the user. So for example, I typically recommend 64 gigabytes at minimum for almost all my shooters. Depending on the camera that you have, that's a few thousand or multiple hundreds of images that you can save in one go. 128 is great. Anything higher than that, fantastic, more storage. The most important aspect of the card, though, is this MB-S or MB/S. That's megabytes per second. And why that matters is that that's the read and write speed of your card. The higher that number is, the better processing this card has to get your information from the shooting aspect to then writing it down aspect. If you're using an entry-level camera or let's say, a beginner camera, the read and write speed, to be honest, might not matter that much to you. But if you're someone who's in the hobbyist level or professional level, then speed on the card should be something you're thinking about, especially if you're taking high quality images. And when I say that, I'm talking about like RAW files, not necessarily JPEG. We talk a little bit more about that in the advanced class. But for this case, my recommendation is always 64 gigabytes or higher. And then get something that has a faster read and write speed. I think around 70 megabytes or faster is a good number to be at. And that works for entry and intermediate. Once you get into advanced, you should get something even faster, but that's a different story. Now, lastly, I do recommend having 2 of these. And my reason behind that is because these cards are extremely fragile. On the back end of your card, I'll remove one of mine that I have in my camera. On the back of the card are these tiny little copper contact strips. And as time goes on, these tiny little copper contact strips become worn out, faded, and they start to just kind of get gunky to the point that when you put it into your camera, it'll show not readable or does not read the card. So again, these things are relatively inexpensive. You can get them as cheap as about $15, $10, and you can go all the way up to a few $100s, again, depending on the quality. But having 2 of these is a great option, just in case one were to fail on you. If you're out and about, like I was in Australia 2 years ago, and I was on the beaches taking photos. One of my cards did give out on me, but luckily I had another one in my bag, and I could switch. That's the type of thing where if you're out and about, you're doing something, it'd be a real shame for you not to be able to capture images because your memory card went out.
Now, are the images lost on the one that fails?
I mean, they can be. Sometimes you can recover them, sometimes. But like for me, for example, if I go out and I shoot, I immediately, that night before I go to bed, doesn't matter what I did all day, I could be very tired, so particular, I'm putting them in the computer. I'm just to get them all saved and down. I'm a stickler with that stuff because I've lost images before and I've put my gigs in jeopardy when I do shoot professionally, and it is a nightmare. So having 2 is a great option, especially if you just want to make sure you've got everything saved and ready to go.
Another good question.
Yeah.
Are you going to share this deck, or do we need to take notes?
I don't share it anywhere, but these videos are live streamed on the YouTube, and you can completely watch them over and over again. They save. So all my 2 years of teaching this class are on there, so you can just watch a rerun on there. But if you want to take notes, if you want to take pictures, some people do both. Now, one of the things I like to say on here is that your pictures don't live on your memory card. I view the memory card kind of like a car. So if your computer is, or if let's say your house is point A and work is point B, you take your car back and forth between point A and B. The same boat, the memory card is similar. It lives in the camera. When you're ready to then get the pictures onto the computer, you remove it from the camera and insert it into the computer and download the images through that way. From there then, after you've used the card and downloaded everything, you typically will delete all the information on the card and then continue to reuse the card over and over again. This is the steps that I go through when I'm downloading all my images. So I start simply by turning the camera off and I wait about 5 seconds. This just ensures that the camera is powered off, all the internals have cooled down, and any of the last images it needed to save, read and write, process are done. If you have a camera and you shoot a bunch with it, turn it off and hold it next to your ear. You can hear the inner components like a car, like coming down. So again, wait that 5 seconds and then go ahead and remove the card. My recommendation is to always use a card reader. You can always transfer the photos from your camera to your phone. Newer cameras, I would say within the last 5-6 years, have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth built into them. So there's apps you can download on your phone. You can transfer that way. Typically though, depending on the quality of your images and your phone, it can distort the image slightly and lower its quality that way. I like to tell customers if you have 5 or 6 photos you want to send to friends and family, awesome. Send them to your phone. That's fantastic. But if you just went on vacation, you took 300, 400 photos, put them on your computer. The phone will get stressed out from there. That's my recommendation. Here's some examples of card readers. Again, you can go crazy. There are tons of different ones out there. The 2 on the left are my personal favorite. The reason being is that this model here has extra ports. So if you have a computer that doesn't have a lot of plug-in space, this might be a great option. This one is really compact and portable. This is the one I personally own, and it works on USB or USB-C. And then if you have a higher-end camera, professional camera, there's these card readers, which they process the larger card, CF Express. We're not going to talk about that in this class, but if anyone has questions on those, I'm more than happy to answer more about compact flashes. But depending on the camera that you have, I recommend getting a card reader of some sort. Keep it in your bag, put it by your desk, whatever makes the most sense. Next, I would recommend copying the photos to a destination folder. And I like to always say copy them. You're not moving these. You're literally duplicating them. And the reason being is that let's say something were to happen where you lose power during the middle of the transfer between one to the other. What could happen is if you move them from the card to the camera or from the card to the computer, you run the risk of losing the photos. But if you duplicate them from one source to the other, you're at least ensuring they still live on the card as they're copying to your computer. Now, when I say destination folder, I do simply mean left click on your computer, create a new folder. The folder can be anything, but I typically recommend labeling it something that makes sense to you. So, for example, my cousin plays baseball. He's 10 or 15 years old. When we go to any of his games and his folks ask me to take pictures, one of the things that I do, let's see, is a 300 megabyte speed necessary for photography? I use an XT. I mean, that's a fantastic card to be using for it. Is it necessary? Or if you're shooting RAW file formats, that's a lot of information that your camera's taking in. 40 megapixels is quite a bit when the industry standard full frame being 24. So yeah, I think that 300 is fantastic. Is it completely necessary? I think that depends on what you're shooting. If you're doing RAW files, absolutely. If you're doing video, I think that you could benefit from the 300 megabyte speed. But if you're doing JPEG, even in a fine quality in the large format, you're probably not using that many megabytes per second as you're reading and writing, but still enough. So I think 300 is fantastic. Is it necessary? I think it's very dependent for you. Hopefully that helps. Now, as we continue forward, I like to label the destination folder after the event that I just did or I shot at. So for example, with my cousin, he plays baseball. I might put on there, Pirates versus, Cobras, and I'll write the date that I took the photos on. If I forget any of the parts of it, using Explorer or Finder, either on Windows or Mac, I should be able to type in some form of information in order to find those photos for a later date. Whether that be the date that I shot them on, whether that be baseball, whether that be the names of the teams, I should be able to locate these photos in a quick and fast way. Secondly, we want to make sure we put them in a secondary location. If the destination folder lives on our computer, we should copy that one to something else. External hard drives are fantastic. Prime Photo and Google Photo have been the two most popular when I've talked to customers before. Google Drive is free for the first 15 gigabytes. Excuse me. And I believe Prime Photo is a similar boat with that too. If you are someone who is interested in cloud-based solutions, I do recommend them. It's nice not having to carry a hard drive with you. If you can remember emails or passwords really easily, it's a nice way for you to log in anywhere that you're at. Take a look at your photos, save more photos. You can share those drives with other people or individuals. There's a lot of nice benefits to it. I personally like the hard drives. I'm a tangible guy. Items like that are easy for me to remember all the time. So personally, I'm a hard drive person, but you can go either way. Next, you want to make sure you eject the card before physically removing it. If you left click on the card, or if you're a Mac user, drag it to the trash can. You can easily eject it from the computer. Once it says it's been properly ejected, you can go ahead and remove it. Now, my recommendation is always to put the card back into the camera, go into your menu settings, and format the card. What that'll do is it'll not only delete all the info that's on the card and give you a clean slate, but it'll also prime and format the card to best respond to the camera you're using. I always get asked what that exactly means, and it's always different depending on the camera that you use. Some cameras require you to format the card before, and that formatting could make or break an extra 30, 40 minutes, could give you an extra couple hundred photos. By formatting the card, you're priming it so that it's ready for use for the specific model of camera that you're using. For me personally, my cards that I use, I have them labeled for what cameras I use them in. So I typically delete them while they're still in the computer. You can do either one. It really is dependent on you. But this is a nice quick way of looking at it so that way you get your photos or videos saved to your computer without running the risk of losing them. Everybody has a different process for it. But this is my 8-step process to do this. To kind of dumb it down and show it with some images just to make sure we're all on the same page, we start with the SD card. That lives inside the camera. We remove that, and using a card reader, we put it into the computer, and we then copy the photos from the card to the computer. Once they're saved on the computer, we have two options for a secondary location. And if you have another one, by all means, go for it. But a hard drive is my personal recommendation, or a cloud-based solution. And again, there are so many different clouds out there to choose from, and it sounds silly to say it, but Google Drive is one of the most popular ones for it. I have friends and family that use Microsoft for work, so OneDrive exists for that. And if you are a creative and you're looking to edit or get into something a little bit more serious, Adobe is a great option too. You could pay monthly for it. Not only do you get the storage space, but then you also get all the editors and all the different stuff to play with. So there's something out there for everybody. There's a butt for every chair, as I like to say. Now let's go through a tour of your camera. This is the part where a lot of people will ask questions or have things for me. Please feel free to interrupt at any point in time. We are going to look at a DSLR camera. For backups considered cloud-based, RAID. I've never heard of RAID personally. I'd have to look into them. But if it's a recommendation, by all means, anybody that's... I'm not sure. I've never heard of it. For backups considered cloud-based, I would for backups consider it. Just, it's a nice way if you're out and about. I mean, I personally carry a hard drive with me everywhere that I go with my camera at all times, just in case I have to look at something and do something. However, some people don't want to do that. Cloud solutions are fantastic. Again, depending on resources and everything else. I think Adobe times out at about 80 or 60 gigabytes of cloud storage on there. I know other places have more storage and competitive rates and prices on it. So RAID, never heard of it myself personally. I'm not a big cloud-based guy, but if that's a good one, definitely worth checking out. I'll have to look myself. The camera that we're going to be looking at, though, for this tour is going to be a DSLR body. I wanted to use the older body, and the reason being is that mirrorless cameras, for the most part, have all the same buttons as a mirrored counterpart. The big difference, though, is where those buttons are, and sometimes that the buttons are in the menu system rather than being out on the camera. However, when it comes to cameras, the symbols and shapes that we see on our camera are, for the most part, universal across the language of cameras. So we're about to look at a Nikon body. That body is going to look very similar to other bodies. Buttons, shapes, and the symbols are also going to be pretty identical. So starting at our top view, video start and stop. Typically on the very top of your camera, you should have a red dot or a red circle. If you're in the automatic setting and you want to start taking video, you can just simply press that button. Your camera will automatically start recording video for you. And when you're done, you can press it again. That'll stop it. The power switch is pretty self-explanatory, but on or off is the way that you can go with that. In the middle of the power switch, or typically around the area of the power switch, you should have the shutter release button. Shutter release is going to work simply by holding this down and squeezing the trigger fully. You'll take a photo. And if you half squeeze on the trigger, you'll focus the camera. There's another button with focusing that I'll talk about in a little bit once we get to that slide. Exposure compensation, which is typically a little box with a white plus and a black minus sign, is the ability for you to control exposure on the unit. Now, if you're in the automatic setting, I hate to say it, you won't get to experience exposure. But once you start to learn your camera a little bit more and get away from the automatic settings, you'll be able to play with things like the exposure compensation. And we'll, again, talk a little bit more about what that means. Exposure overall, though, is going to be the darkness or the lightness of your photo. And using a little graph, you're able to then bring that back and forth to make the image look darker or lighter. The mode dial is, to me, one of the most important aspects of your camera. The mode dial is kind of like the brains. I like to call it the gear shift in your car. It's your ability to go from reverse to neutral to drive. Same thing with this guy. The mode dial is going to be the way that you control the brains or the operation of the camera. Obviously, there's other dials and knobs that will control what you're able to fix and play with on the camera. But that mode dial is going to basically be the driving force to tell your camera, this is what I want to accomplish. The LV switch or live view switch has changed over the years. This button used to be specifically for DSLRs. You would press this button or flip this switch and it would then turn on the LCD screen. However, nowadays that's not necessarily the case. If you have a mirrorless camera, you might see a display button somewhere on your camera. Let's see if I can find mine on there. Yep, mine says DISP on there. So I've got the display button there. Display button will do something similar, where it'll change the screen on your camera to represent whatever you want it to be. Some people would prefer this as all black. Some people want to see through it. Some people want it to look like the controls. By pressing this button, it'll change the format of how the screen looks. And then the command dial is last. Now the command dial exists in two different spots, especially on a more technical camera. You'll typically have a command dial in the back, which I have right there. And then you'll a lot of the times have a command dial in the front, which is right there. And the idea behind those command dials is when you're in a manual control or an aperture control or a shutter control, this is how you're able to change the numbers. So next week, when we get into more of the finer details of how aperture works and how shutter works by themselves, it'll make more sense how those control those numbers. For now, though, I want everyone to really focus in on automatic. And the reason being is that auto is the base and the simplest way to get started with your camera. Excuse me. One of the things I've noticed with a lot of customers or people is that they'll buy a camera, they may have had some experience with it, or they remember shooting years ago. They'll immediately try to go to manual control, and they'll become frustrated. Why are my images so dark? Why are my images blurry? Why am I not getting good light? Why can't I control, XYZ aspects? And a lot of it is because you just don't know how to do it yet. And there's really no simple way to put it. So I love for customers, for anybody who's getting brand new into cameras, start with automatic. The camera is so intelligent nowadays. It does a fantastic job with lighting, with color. The brains of the camera are not like the old DSLR days where it was a little bit slow and hard to read. Automatic is a great way to get started with your camera, to feel comfortable with it, to get used to using a camera rather than your cell phone. So I highly recommend when you first open the box, start with automatic and get comfortable with the camera ergonomics. But keep this in mind though, while automatic is simple and is easy, the mode dial itself has a lot of information on there. Now, I could break this all down for you and confuse you, but I think one of the things that I'd like to just say is that remember, with whatever camera you buy, all mode dials are going to look a little different. So do your research a little bit, find out what's important to you. If there might be a control that you like or some information on a camera that you like, we can always do our best to answer those questions specifically for you. But one of my biggest things is find an artist or find a photographer that you're interested in, that you like, you're enjoying their work, and see what equipment they're using. They might be using the top of the line, the best product out there, but they had to get there somehow. And there's a lot of cameras within that family or tree of cameras that they own that maybe don't cost nearly as much or will deliver a similar quality but come in at a better price. So there's research to be done there, but just keep that in mind. All these mode dials are from different brands, different cameras, and they all function a little bit differently. On all the mode dials, though, these are the things that you can expect. So written on the camera, usually in green font, will be auto or A+. Auto control over settings and functions of a camera. M is for full manual, so that's full manual control over the camera's array of functions. A or AV is aperture priority, and S or TV is shutter priority. Next week, we're really going to break those two down and talk about the exposure triangle and how kind of the base of photography works. But to kind of clue you in, aperture is just control of the aperture, which controls two things: how much light you're letting into the camera, and then how much of the foreground and the background that you're separating or keeping flat. Shutter also controls how much light you're letting into the camera, but it controls the speed at which you're capturing an image. So if something's moving fast, you typically want faster speeds, so that way you can get them in stop motion or slow motion. If they're not moving very fast, you probably want it a little bit slower. But again, we'll talk a little bit more about this next week and really break it down. Program is my next favorite after automatic. So if you feel like you've already learned auto or you feel comfortable with it, P or program auto is the next one I would recommend. So aperture and shutter speed are going to be automatic. That you don't have to worry about. But everything else is changeable. So I just talked about exposure, for example. You can customize the exposure on the camera in the program auto, and the camera will still allow for aperture and shutter to fire as normal. That might make a lot of sense, but again, next week when we start breaking down those features, it should help. And again, I apologize, everybody. I am under the weather, so hand sanitizer galore has been my friend. What's going on? That's all that matters. I don't know about tomorrow, but we'll figure that out. And then B, that's the bulb setting. You won't see this as much anymore, but it still is available. Long exposure on your camera. If you want to do a longer exposure for more detail or for movement or for lights, B used to be a setting on your mode dial you could go to. Camera was fully customizable. Excuse me. But as long as you're holding down the shutter release, the camera will stay open. Your dials only have numbers. So in that case, if your dials only have numbers, you're most likely not controlling things via the, like this with the mode dial. Typically, and my camera also does the same thing, those numbers are written on there to show you kind of the controls and the speeds. Those written out numbers are for manual control of the camera. What I might do is look to see if they have like an X or a C or anywhere on the camera that might show automatic features. That would then show or confirm with what you have. Worst case scenario, I'll have my phone number, email at the end. You can always send me what camera model that you have, and I could probably figure out and answer how you would switch to an automatic control. But like my camera, for example, I only have numbers on the top. Everything else is controlled within the unit itself. And that's a beautiful thing. Again, all cameras are a little bit different, and every camera has different, not features necessarily, but different ways to control the same thing. But again, going back to the B1, as long as you're holding the shutter release, the camera will stay open. This was great for long exposure photography, which is still something you can do, but you can do it either in the full manual control or the shutter control nowadays. So you might see your camera doesn't have a B on the mode dial. Now, for those of you, oh, excuse me. For those of you that have an older camera, or maybe you have an entry-level camera, you might have what we call scenes. Scenes are automatic modes. So again, if you are someone who is getting this camera and you see these extra features on the bottom, what this basically is are, or what these basically are automatic modes that are more specialties. So for example, the little man that's running in the corner here, that's meant to be for action or movement photography. The little white square with the star behind it, nighttime or dark photography. Your flowers for macro or close-up. Your mountain is for nature or wildlife, landscape. And then the head is for portrait. There's also a non-flash button, and I believe the CA is a customizable auto, which always confused me a little bit because I think it's the same as P. But again, I haven't used scenes in a very long time. So scenes are great, but they are just automatic modes. And the reason you'll see a lot of cameras don't have them anymore is because the new mirrorless technology, especially when it comes to automatic, is a huge improvement from what the DSLR counterparts had to offer. All right, getting more into it, the flash button. If you have a camera that has a pop-up flash, you can press this button. This should engage the flash unit. In the next photo you take, it'll flash. FN or function. So this can change from camera to camera. You might see FN buttons. You might see a C1, C2, C3 button. You might also see I. You might also see Q. FN, I, Q, or C1, C2, C3 are customizable function buttons. What this basically is are shortcuts to menu systems that you might use frequently. On higher end or mid-tier cameras, you might see the customizable option. On more entry-level cameras, function might just be a preset button. Typically, though, if you go into the menu system of the camera, you can customize those, where that might matter. So, for example, on my camera, I have a function or an FN button, and when I press on the FN button, it allows for me to change my targets, or my target recognition. So I can switch between having a wide angle view, a mid-tier view, and then a tight angle view. I can also switch between if I want to target humans, animals, vehicles. It'll help give my camera more sense of pointing and recognition. FN can also switch between how you want your filter to look, your color science. FN could be the difference between you using JPEG versus RAW. There's a whole bunch of different reasons for why you might want to use the FN function button. And if your camera allows for it, you can customize it to make it a shortcut that's more relevant to you and your photography practice. Let's keep it on the camera body, and then I'll move to the lens. The lens release button is on there as well. The lens release button is pretty simple. Holding down that button and turning clockwise should then have it where your lens can remove from the camera. There's typically dots or arrows or squares on there. Match those two up, turn counterclockwise until you hear a click. The camera then should have the lens locked back into place. You're good to fire. At the very bottom of the camera body, you should see the drive mode button. Now, the drive mode is really cool. If you are someone who is taking action photography or a lot of movement, you can set up burst photography on there. So if you're shooting, and let's say you have a kid who's running track, you might want to get a nice still frame of them as they cross the finish line. You could turn burst on. This is kind of that noise you hear with photographers where it's a ch-ch-ch-ch-ch-ch. That's basically it firing at how many ever frames per second that the camera is capable of. Typically, higher end cameras can do faster frame rates. Mid-tier or lower end cameras have a certain number they tap out at. I'd say average is probably around 14, if not 10 frames a second, depending. The other symbol on there is a timer. So you can also set a timer up if you want to set a 10-second or 5-second timer, run in front of the camera and take your photo. Cool part, and I'll talk about it at the end, is that there's an app you can download with your phone, and a lot of the times you can use that as a remote control, which is really cool. Going back to the lens. This is a telephoto lens, or an entry kit level lens, but it has telephoto zoom to it, so we have a zoom ring. Turning this ring back and forth will then dictate how wide or tight your viewing angle is. Almost all modern day cameras, unless you're buying a rangefinder from Leica, have what we call a focus ring. Focus ring will be, or have automatic focus, I should say. If you're shooting video or you prefer the old school method, you can always still use the focus ring. I recommend focusing manually for video, especially, but for photography too. Some people are faster at focusing with the ring than they are with using the autofocus. For entry-level lenses that don't have a lot of electronic components that help move the lens, you might see a lens retract button. And all that is a lock, where then if you're traveling with the lens, you can turn it, hold the button down, and it'll click into place. If you go to turn the lens, it won't turn until you click the lens retract button again. So it's a locking mechanism, usually good for traffic. Which uni is this? This is the entry level, so this is the basic camera class. And we're doing this here at Apt Electronics in Glenview, Illinois. From there, then, I think that's all I had for the lens. So yeah, lens retract button was the last button on this. Now again, for those joining me, those brand new, I am showing off a DSLR body to show you the symbols and the shapes that you might see on your camera buttons. However, they might not be in this location, so keep that in mind. However, the terminology, the buttons, the kind of symbols that go along with these, you will see these across the board on your cameras. Some cameras will have buttons that are more unique or special to the specific bodies or the brand. And if you have those unique questions on there, again, my phone number, email will be posted at the end of this. You can always reach out, send me images. I can always talk to you a little bit more about what you have. So going to the back, let's start with the menu button. A lot of people think that the menu button is going to be the driving force for you changing certain aspects in your camera. And it's true to a certain degree. Are you changing things to help you shoot like aperture, shutter, and ISO? No. Typically that's done through that FN button I was talking about. Or in this case, we have the I button now, which is very similar to the FN button. It's typically a shortcut menu to get you into the most commonly changed aspects of your camera. Menu, though, on the other side of it can be something that you use for a multitude of reasons. One, time and date. Maybe you need to change or update that. Maybe you have a Wi-Fi or Bluetooth preference that you want to do. If you want to format the card, that's your way of doing it. The brightness on the LCD screen, the powerfulness of the microphone. Maybe you've connected another microphone to the camera and you want dual audio. There's ways to change settings within the camera to benefit you. That's done, again, through the menu button. Diameter adjustment. I'm wearing contacts right now, but when I am in my four eyes state, the diameter change is really great. If you've had a pair of binoculars before, there's typically a dial on the binoculars that you turn one direction or the other. That'll then give you clarity through what you're looking through. In the same boat as this, when you look through the viewfinder on your camera, it might look blurry or not focused. If you just turn that small little dial next to it over, it should then change for your eyesight. Now, the info button isn't on every single brand, but I do like the info button if you have a camera that has it. Also, let me make sure that my charger for this is plugged in, because I don't believe it is. Let's see. No, it's not going here. Wait, what else do I have plugged in? Bear with me for one moment, folks. I am changing something. Oh, I don't think I can. All right. Hopefully my laptop doesn't die midway through. Let's keep going from there. So, info button. So, info button isn't on all the newer cameras, but Canon has kept this on a lot of their entry levels. I think Nikon might have this on their entry level. If you take a photo of something and you then, let's jump a little bit. If you use the image playback button on your camera to take a photo of something or to play back the image that you just took, you can use the multi-selector tool to scramble and look for that image in your camera's library. And then from there, when you find an image that you really like, if you press the info button on that image, it should tell you the settings that were used for that image. So if you are shooting in automatic and you take a really sharp, nice photo and you're like, what did my camera do? This was incredible. Most likely, if you press the info button, it'll tell you the shutter speed, the aperture that you used, and then the ISO. It'll tell you the date that you took it, timestamp, and depending on the camera brand, it might even be able to geolocate where you took that physical photo. I know Nikon's famous for that. Yeah. But the info button's a great tool for beginner photographers to learn a little bit more about what their camera is doing for them that help the image look as sharp as it is. Because for the most part, there is no one setting to put your camera to when you're shooting in the daytime or when you're shooting at night. If you're using manual control, it's because that you understand that by changing one dial, you probably have to now change something else in order to get the image in its entirety and clarity. Jumping from there, focus or exposure lock. This is your back focus button. Some people don't enjoy holding that trigger down. You could also use this button for that. We talked about image playback. We talked about the I button. OK is your enter button. Pressing that will hit enter for you for the most part. We talked about multi-select. Delete function. The delete button is on the camera. You can always use it. It's goofy, but this has always stuck with me. I have a couple different camera vendors that I work really closely with, Nikon, Canon, Sony. And every time we talk to the reps or the brands about it, they always have a funny joke that in the grand scheme of things, if you hit the delete button, it takes more juice out of the camera than it is to physically take a photo. Like uses double the amount of juice to do it. Now, how true that is, I don't know. But folks, my recommendation is shoot as much as you can on your camera. When you get home, you have a computer screen or an iPad or something, then go through and delete that way. You can really see the crisp clarity of the photo, that direction, having a bigger screen versus the small little 3-inch screen that you're looking at. Keep that in mind. If you are someone who wants to look at your photos and be like, how'd this turn out? The magnify and demagnify are great ways to check how crisp your edges or your angles are, how good your background to foreground separation is, how blurry a photo is. It's a really nice tool to zoom into the photo and zoom out. It's not bad when you're shooting to use something like that because then you can see if you're doing the proper thing in the field versus finding out about it when you get home. This is one of my favorite photos. A customer emailed this to me about 3 or 4 weeks into me working here. And they told me I sold them a bad camera and that it didn't work. And I have a saying that I love telling people that it's not the baseball bat, it's the baseball player. Just because you're in a slump doesn't mean that the bat's bad. You're just not hot. In this case with the camera, she bought it. She didn't realize she was using manual control and she got really frustrated and flustered. She came in, we sat down for about 30 minutes, went through it, and we realized what the issue was. Simple as that. Take the time to learn the product. Get familiar with it. And if you are someone who's interested in getting into photography, having your camera with you, not necessarily everywhere you go, but for the most part, with you at all times, you really start to learn the ins and outs of the product without having to spend a lot of time studying it. Practice always makes perfect. Your camera isn't a smartphone, and this sometimes is a little bit hard to get used to. The phone has made it easy for us as photographers. When you think about when the first iPhone came out in 2007, it didn't have a camera on there. The second generation iPhone introduced it, and we've never looked back since. It has hurt photography in a certain degree financially, but has it ruined the image taking? No. If anything, it's made it easier. It's made it simpler. It's made everybody feel empowered to be a photographer, and it captures amazing life moments and has really great benefits to it. However, Is it a extremely amazing image? Does it offer you the complexity that a film or a nice digital camera would? No, absolutely not. And that's probably the reason you've come to either this class or you're interested in it, is because you're ready to take the next step in the photography journey. You want something of quality, of something you can build with, whatever it might be. Don't get frustrated at your camera. The camera can do everything the smartphone can. It's just that you have to learn how to control and manipulate the camera to get what you want. Of course, using automatic is only going to give you so-so images, but as you start to practice and you get past automatic, the door opens up and that manual control can make a whole lot of difference in your photography skills and game. This is a simple one, but I see people constantly doing this. I live in Chicago. I live downtown Chicago. Tourism is, bread and butter down there. It helps the economy, the growth. But tourists, it's very funny to watch them hold cameras. They're not very good at it. So you don't look silly while you're doing it. Keep your elbows down as you're shooting. You don't want someone bumping into you because you have your wings out as you're shooting. You also get more stability when you hold it properly. So one hand on the bottom of your camera, one hand on the right. The right-hand side is the one that's manipulating, controlling everything. This hand is either changing things on the lens, focusing in on the buttons on the side, or simply just adding stabilization to the bottom. On top of that, too, having your elbows locked into place also gives you a better chance to not have such a shaky grip. Having your elbows lodged into your ribs really creates a nice platform to balance the camera on. And lastly, keep your back straight. Really easy and common for people to have back stress or problems with photography because it's very easy for you to want to dip down and get low when you're shooting. Not necessary, and overall it just can hurt you in the long run. Oops. Focus and then shoot, and shoot through the whole picture. Remember that when you're taking a photo, unless you're taking a picture of one item with no background and you're in a studio space, you're most likely going to have aspects of the photo that are either out of your control or within your control that maybe aren't supposed to be there. But remember that they all are there. Until you edit or you fix the problem or you do anything. Another thing to focus on too is make sure you focus and then shoot. Blurry images happen, and a blurry image doesn't necessarily mean a bad image. It can show motion, it can show action, it can show depth. But a blurry image can also be a nuisance, and it can also offer us a kind of not a pretty sight, if you will. There are millions of artists that have made a lot of money on blurry photos. We are not that artist, and we are trying to make sure that we have that actual. We want to make sure we have a good quality image. What's the advantage of using the electronic viewfinder versus the back screen? It's dependent. It's up to you. Now, the back screen is fantastic, but if you've got a lot of sun or glare, it's very hard to see everything on that screen. The screen is larger on the back of your camera, obviously. And for the most part, your screen on a lot of these newer cameras can come out and turn and spin for you. Great feature, especially if you're using video or if you're doing stuff in that realm. Another thing, too, is if you're shooting downwards like this, you have the ability to pull the screen up to you to see exactly what you're getting when you're holding it at such a crazy angle. That's another aspect of it. But for the viewfinder, if you wear glasses or you've got a bright sunny day, putting your eye up to the viewfinder will help you block everything else out. And that's why sometimes you'll see viewfinders have these giant cups on there. So it does cause like a little blackout on the eye, and all you see is what's ahead of you. So advantages to the viewfinder, I would say, are you block out everything else. You have one eye focused in the camera. You don't see anything except for what comes through the viewfinder. With the screen, you have a larger space. You have an easier time to see everything. You can kind of contort it in different directions that you might need. Yeah. Let me also make sure I think my camera is not. There we go. All right, let's get back to it. And let me just make sure. Okay, this looks good. Perfect. They gave me a new setup for these classes. I've got a nice microphone now, as everyone probably can hear with my sniffling, and then a new camera. And I'm still learning how to get through all this stuff. My screen just doesn't want to load. Okay, give it 2 seconds. It'll go back. All right. For those of you watching online, the next step in this. So if you or your camera are moving, you're going to get blurry pictures. And then we'll jump to the next slide. And just waiting for the glass to update and the actual side, this side. It's probably because I'm getting low on battery here. Ugh. Let's see if I can just jump a little bit. This is a shame. Hold on, everybody. Give me 1 second. I need to get the juice going on this guy. Let me do this. I'm going to turn my camera off, I think, for a second. Perfect. I am going to try to plug this in, though, so I don't have any issues with this thing dying. Excellent. And then this can get plugged back in. And let me just do this. Sorry, everybody. Bear with me for one moment. My IT team is drilling it into me. All right, that looks perfect. All right, I think we're cooking with gas, everybody. Sorry about that. New system, new technical difficulties. Let me clear this out. No bats in the cave. Okay, we're back. If you or the camera are moving, you are going to get blurry photos. Plant yourself. Have confidence with it. And again, remember to plant your arms and keep yourself stationary. It'll help a lot. Again, thousands of artists have made a lot of money selling blurry photos. We are not that artist, and our goal is to capture the image in its entirety. I like this picture a lot because it kind of shows as the camera's focusing. But again, for you to go to Paris, if you were to only take blurry photos of the Eiffel Tower, you would be extremely embarrassed and probably upset with yourself and probably the camera too. So remember, keep yourself planted, keep yourself stationary, try to avoid blurry pictures. If you are moving with the camera, take a breather, stop. Take the photo. Date your body, marry your glass. So now we're going to talk a little bit about lenses to get to closer to the end of the class. Lenses are the next big conversation to have within there. And the reason being is that lenses are extremely important. Your camera only works because you have a lens on there. The better quality your glass, the longer or the better your photos will come out. And in the long run of things, your camera body probably only has about 10 good years on it before the technology's outdated, before the camera starts to run into mechanical issues, before you start to notice that the quality of the images just isn't what you want. So if you're a photographer or if I were you, the thing I invest the most in would be the glass of the camera. The better I invest in the glass, the better that the lenses come out to be. And then as you upgrade and change your bodies out, you'll be able to bring that glass with you to the next camera. Even brands like Canon and Nikon, who have created adapters and changed their mounting system after 20, 40 years, have adapters now where you can bring the old glass to the new cameras and not sacrifice quality.
When you're saying glass, you just mean the lens?
The lens, yeah. You'll hear that a lot with lenses. They refer, especially like camera people, they refer to them as glass a lot of the time. Because it really does come down to the glass on the inside of the camera being the driving factor. The way the lenses work, it sounds kind of nerdy, but you have lenses that are more like, I forgot, and then you have concave lenses, and then you have these like other lenses that'll look like this on the inside. They're technically not drilled or attached by anything. They're suspended by nitrogen gas. And then as you're using the lens, especially when you get like a zoom or telephoto lens, the actual glass on the inside shifts back and forth to give you that tighter view as you're zooming in and out. That's how zoom works. It's really amazing. And again, what's crazy about it is that engineers that are really, really smart, smarter than myself, created this stuff, and they created their whole like kind of language behind it. And when I say language, we're talking about focal length or millimeter size. There's a mathematical equation out there that someone created and did, and the way that we represent the zoom of the lens is we refer to the millimeter size. I've had so many people ask, if I take a ruler and measure it, does that show on the lens? No, I honestly have never once figured it out myself, but I've also never looked that hard. So in the world of photography, our view goes from tight to wide. The wider an angle is, typically the lower the number is, and the tighter the angle is, the wider an angle is, the smaller the number. The tighter the angle is, the larger the number. So for example, if we look at 70 millimeters, versus 105, we can see how it changes going from there. If we look at 70 to 400, we can see how drastic of a jump that we're getting on there. Focal length and zoom equate to each other. They're both very synonymous with each other. So remember that the lower the number, the more wide of an angle you're going to get. The bigger the number, the tighter of a view you're going to get. And again, it's all dependent on what's in front of you. But if you look at these images, for example, you've got this group of birds that are sitting in a swamp or a marsh area. At 70 millimeters, we can see the sky, the itty bitty tiny bit of the land, and then a giant thing of water with white dots in the center. As we start to zoom in, we're not only zooming in on the birds. That's an important thing to remember, that everything within our lens or everything that we see is moving or zooming as we're zooming. So again, you see how far away the birds are at 70 millimeters, but at 400, they're right up on us. And the trees and the foliage that's behind it also have more detail, more color, more robust energy to them. The mountain range is no longer really a mountain range, you barely can see it. And that building's top that's all the way hidden in the back is more visible as well. Focal length and zoom go hand in hand together. The bigger the number, the tighter the view. The smaller the number, the wider the angle you're going to get. If you buy a point-and-shoot model camera that has no interchangeable lenses, you'll typically see on there, it'll say T and W when you zoom. T standing for tight, W standing for wide. Focal length, though, also leads into compression. So this is where it becomes important for artists and photographers to understand this. In the world of photography, typically 35 millimeters is one of the lowest you'd want to go for a portrait. The reason being is that when you start to get into these wider numbers, and for example, you'll see the screen stop at 20 or 16, you see how narrow the face becomes. Doesn't necessarily mean that you can't use that for portrait lenses, but typically you will distort or compress the image to a certain degree. Same thing when you start to get a wide or a longer zoom lens with a larger number. You'll also compress or distort the image and make it a little bit too, I don't know if pudgy is the word or bulky, but you can see in his face how much bigger and robust it becomes at 200 versus at the 50 or the 35 where it looks pretty slender and normal. And then also versus the extreme of the 16 and 20 where it looks like his nose is 3D coming through the screen. So keep that in mind. Focal length and zoom go hand in hand. But focal length can create, depending on the focal length you choose, can create compression or distortion based on the images that you're shooting. Always important to, look online, see what other people are using for certain circumstances to figure out what you might need. For example, portrait photographers typically love a 35, a 50 millimeter, an 85 millimeter. Those are some of the greatest portrait lenses or prime lenses out there. Some people might even say that a 24 to 70 or a 28 to 50 is a good option if you need a little bit of zoom with that. Now you get into landscape and architecture photographers, they might say 16 to 35 millimeters is better because they have more zoom, they have a wider playing field, more things that they can pick up in the frame versus having something that's a tighter lens. And for those who are animal enthusiasts or wildlife photographers, or maybe you're taking pictures of your kids' sporting events, you might benefit from the longer lenses because that gives you the distance and the reach in order to get and capture whatever it is you're trying to do. Multitude of different reasons for why you might want the lens, but it's important to think about that as you're going and getting ready to shoot, finding the lens that's beneficial to you. That being said, let me just talk a little bit about common lenses. We'll talk a little bit about content creation, and then I'll end the class. If you guys have questions, you can ask then, and same for yourself. So common lenses, these are what you'll see if you're out and about and you're buying a camera for the first time. My recommendation is always the kit lens. Typically, it's an entry-level lens. Next week, we're going to talk about aperture and understand why aperture matters on these lenses. But the aperture on this lens is weak. It's a 3.5 to 5.6, meaning it's variable. If you've never touched a camera before, you're buying a camera for the first time, if in a perfect world, if you have a lot of money to spend, by all means, get whatever lens is recommended to you or you did research on. But if you're brand new into photography and you're just getting started, a kit lens is a wonderful way to get involved, to get started. It might not be the best quality of lens, but it's a great starting point so you can feel comfortable to continue to shoot. And typically they give a wide range. For example, this is 18 to 55, which talking about focal length, that's a nice wide angle, and it can get you to portrait as well too. So if you're getting into this and you don't know what you really want to take pictures of, but you know you want a camera, the kit lens is a great way to get started. Eventually down the road, you can trade this in, upgrade into better lenses, or look for good used gear. But this is a great way for you to get your bearings. If you're someone who's interested in portrait photography, or you have a very particular focal length or area or space that you're trying to photograph in, a prime lens might be a good option. One of the most famous prime lenses of all time is the Nifty 50. They say that the 50 millimeter lens is the exact copy of what the human eye sees. So human eye sees at 50 millimeters. That's at least what they say. That being said, 50 millimeter a lot of the times gets commented as one of the best prime lenses, as like your number one prime lens, as the best portrait lens, and that's why they've named it the Nifty 50. It's nifty. Prime lenses are great. They usually only do one thing, and that is whatever's written on there. So 50 millimeter, for example, that only is a 50 mil lens. No zoom on this product. However, typically prime lenses have a nice aperture. So in this case, it has a 1.4. It's a sharp lens, lets a lot of light in. There's a lot to play with, and it's specifically a portrait lens or a lens that would not zoom. So from there, your focal length always being 50 should kind of give you an idea of space, an area, how far you need to stand from a target, how farther back you need to be to get certain aspects into it. That's what a 50 millimeter can be beneficial, but also can be a little bit of a disadvantage when using.
Yeah, when you have a prime lens, you're moving your body instead of zooming.
Exactly, and I'll talk about that at the end because I talk about the pros and cons between them because everyone always asks that. With a zoom lens or telephoto, it's exactly the opposite of that. Typically, it's going to give you numbers that you can zoom in between. So for example, two of my most popular, 24 to 70, one of the most famous street lens photographies behind the 35 millimeter, or about, yeah, I'd say behind the 35. Or the 70 to 200, which is a very popular lens, especially if you're kind of in between and nature, portrait photography, even a little bit of action photography. It's fantastic. Now, a prime lens can get a really low aperture. Some of the best are 1.2. They're expensive, but they're the best lenses out there. These can get down to 2.8. Zoom lenses usually can't get past that number. Again, I think it kind of comes down to the glass, how much glass is needed. It would cost a heck of a lot of money to have that. So again, you weigh the pros and cons. Perks to this lens is the fact that it's a zoom lens. So if you've got a tighter angle and you need to find what fits and get the correct millimeter size, you can zoom back and forth until you have the framing correct. You don't necessarily have to move your own body. Now, if we're going to sit there and say pros and cons between the two, let's keep this in mind. As far as aperture is concerned, the prime lens has the better aperture. The zoom lens has still a fantastic aperture, but typically a little lesser. And again, aperture is all about background to foreground separation and how much light you're letting into the body. The negative side to then the other ones is that with your zoom lens, it weighs a heck of a lot more than the prime lens does. A lot more glass, components, metal. That being said, they're a little bit bulkier and tougher to bring around. Portrait photographers love the 50, love those smaller lenses because they can kind of bop around and do what they need to do without getting fatigued. However, if you've got a weird shot and you don't got the right angle for it, if you don't have a zoom lens, you're most likely going to have to reposition yourself a few times until you get that angle right. Versus a zoom lens, you should just be able to change the dial a little bit and you're still going to be able to execute the image that you want, give or take the lighting situation. Again, it's a goofy thing to think about. I personally own multiple of each style of lens, and I would say it's circumstantial. As you become more professional or as you start to increase your lens collection, you'll find ways to use the lenses for particular moments in time, and you'll find out what works best for certain situations. When I do an event, I film the Chicago Polar Plunge every year. I get in the water. That's one of the things that I do. I typically use a 24 to 70 zoom lens. It doesn't necessarily give me the best background to foreground separation, but when I need a wide angle shot of everyone running into the river or the lake, and when I need to zoom in on someone wearing a fun costume or getting ready to dive backwards, I have that ability to do so. Afterwards, though, we have a beautiful after party. We invite everybody there. We talk about how much money we raised. I show that video. I then take portrait photos of everybody who come into the venue afterwards. I would use a prime lens for that situation. Lenses can become circumstantial depending on how far into photography you are. That's why a kit lens is a good option to get started with. And as you feel more comfortable and you've learned these products and you found a reason for them, upgrading then is the next step. Last but not least, the travel lens or the all-in-one lens. I couldn't find one that, or at least a nice image that had it, but a lot of the times these travel lenses or all-in-one lenses will be like 18 to 400. They're a little bit larger, but these are really not necessarily the best quality glass. This is usually entry-level glass. This is usually something that's more of a jack of all trades versus being a specialty lens. Where is this good and what is this great for? I had a father a few years ago who came in. He was about to go on a safari with his kids. He was excited. He had a beautiful camera setup he's had for years, but he looked at the weight restrictions on the plane. They were like, you can only carry this much weight, you can only bring this. He's like, I got to bring a camera with me, but I'm stuck. Do I bring my big bad lens or do I just bring small lenses and crop in after the fact? We then landed on getting something like this. Typically an inexpensive lens, not the best quality of lenses, but the photos he got were fantastic. And on top of that too, he didn't have to carry multiple lenses with him. He could just have the one and hit all the different angles. So is a travel lens the perfect lens for every situation? No. But if you find yourself in a crunch and you can only have X, Y, Z, maybe parameters, or again, you don't want to be bulky, you don't want to carry all your gear with you, it's a great alternative to then bringing every part of your arsenal with you. That being said, what lenses do I need? And I like to put the quotations around need because, again, photography, unless this is your bread and butter and what you're doing for life, this is typically a hobby or something that you're getting into post whatever else you do. When I say need on there, you truly don't need all of these. But if you were to come to me and say, I've got infinite amount of money to spend, what do I want? What should I buy? I would put you towards what we call the Trinity in the camera world. A prime lens of your choosing, a short telephoto, and a long telephoto. So in this case, the perfect world for the most people is the 50 prime. That's the number one. The nifty 50 is perfect in almost all aspects. 24 to 70 is a great street lens photography. When I say street lens, again, I live in Chicago. If I want to take a beautiful picture of all the buildings lined up with the sunset going behind it, I might stay at 24. And if I see, let's say, a pack of pigeons flying in the air that looks cool, I might zoom into 70 to get that more of a portrait style photo. 24 to 70 is versatile. It's great for walking around. And it's just a nice overall, easy to use lens. And if I'm out in the field and I'm taking pictures of wildlife, animals, maybe I'm on a hike, I might use something like a 70 to 200. So I have that advantage of getting farther distance shots, especially when it comes to nature, sports, action of any kind. The more zoom that you have, the better, because again, you don't know how far back you're going to have to be in certain situations. These are also interchangeable. Some people don't like the 50, they want a 35 millimeter. Some people don't want 24 to 70, they want 16 to 35. Maybe a 70 to 200 is not enough, you have a 100 to 400. Personally, in my collection, I have a 50 and a 35 millimeter. I have a 24 to 70, and I have a 100 to 400 for my needs. I skip the 70 to 200, but if I were to buy another lens in the future, I probably would be in between the 70 to 200, or that 16 to 35 has been really popular with its size categories. There's so many more lenses out there. There's specialty lenses too. You can get crazy with this stuff. The important thing is to remember, find the lens based on the needs that you find. Go out, take photos, and as you become faster and better with it, think about then what you're taking images of and maybe what lenses or focal length in particular could deliver you something a little bit more of a better experience.
Question.
Yeah.
If I like to take pictures of nature but not far away, like close-ups of like foliage or
Mhm.
bugs?
50 would probably be great for that. And I might even look to, depending, macro lenses exist.
Okay.
And macro are fantastic for that. I have a customer of mine who comes in. He is a Sony camera shooter. They make a 100 millimeter macro lens. It's an $800 lens, but he loves bugs. And he'll get so close to these crazy beetles that have beautiful coloration on their back shells.
Yeah.
And I mean, insane. I also have a dentist customer who uses macro lenses. That's how he shows images of the teeth and what he's working on. It's so freaky. It's so freaky when you see teeth that close, but that's part of his practice, and he uses it for that. So yeah, 100%. I would say macro would be the ideal lens, but 50 millimeter, 85 millimeter, those would be fantastic. And if you want something with a little zoom, you could try that 24 to 70, but I think that might be too wide. It'd be a great everyday lens, but yeah, that's kind of where I would think of. A couple last things I'll talk about here because I'm almost at the 7 o'clock range. Timer app, camera app. Download the camera app that you have. They can be a little bit wonky. I will admit that. Leica is one of the only ones that is truly made for iPhone, and it's a wonderful experience in my opinion. But I shoot on Nikon, Sony, I've shot on Canon, Lumix. I've used all their apps. They're still fantastic. So don't be afraid. Try the camera app, download images, play with them. You can also use your phone as a timer if you want to get more of this dramatic shots like what you see on the left-hand side. So there are options available. Lastly, and I won't bore you with this stuff, we talk about this more in the advanced camera class because I think video is really important. More and more of these mirrorless cameras, these new cameras can do 4K video, and they have fantastic video on the inside. If you're a DSLR shooter, you probably have limited video experience with these cameras because they weren't necessarily built with the stabilization and the quality like these mirrorless are. It's unbelievable what they can do. More and more people I see coming in are not just buying a camera for still photography, they're interested in video. And the reason being is that for social media, for marketing, for whatever it is that you're doing to make your business or your, whatever your priority is blow up, video is becoming more and more the key to the whole thing. That's why TikTok is so popular and valuable to people, Instagram. Photos still are always going to exist and be important, but the advantages of video are amazing. My 4 things I always tell people to do: camera quality, stabilization, lighting, and audio. Those are the 4 things you should be focusing on as you're getting into this. Camera quality, having proper lenses, proper body and camera settings, stabilization, a tripod, a gimbal, lighting. Make sure you have nice lighting for it because if they can't see you while you're shooting, nobody cares. In the same sense as audio. If your audio is bad and not good, it's another strike against you with your video and what you're doing. Focus on these 4 and you'll create something that's really nice, really pops. And if you need even more help with that, it's great because more and more the camera world is understanding your needs. They make these combo kits to get into this stuff. So if you're someone who's like, I want to be a vlogger, or I want to start YouTube, or maybe I just want to push my social media presence, these are fantastic kits to get into that, where you either get the camera and all this equipment, or like for Sony, for example, you buy the camera separately, you buy this kit later on to get into it. Fantastic. While I am a salesman here at the store as well as a teacher, I'm not big on pushing people into buying certain accessories, but I will say if I had to tell you to do 5, the top 5 are my picks. Get a bag. Protect this expensive thing that you bought, whether it's $300 or if it's $6,000. Protect it, keep it safe, especially when you're traveling. An extra battery and an extra memory card are the 2 biggest things I think everybody should always get when they're buying this stuff. If you're out and about in the field and you have a camera with you and you didn't charge the battery that's in it, it's not fun. I just turned my camera on today and it's been sitting with me in my bag. I've left it in the car a couple times. The battery's completely gone. No battery in there with how cold it's been outside. So that's another aspect to it. Have an extra battery. We talked about in the beginning of the class that memory card. It's really important too. If that gets worn out or breaks, again, if you're out and about shooting pictures, the camera won't let you take any more photos without a memory card in there. A lens cleaning kit. Please do not use your t-shirt, your sweaters, and everything to clean the glass. It's not the first time that it'll happen, but 100 times, 300 times of you taking your sweater and wiping the glass, you'll create micro scratches. Those micro scratches are going to damage your autofocus. They're going to make your photos blurry. And again, it's not one time, it's 1,000 times that will eventually cause this to happen. And then a camera strap. If the strap that comes with the camera isn't comfortable, I personally like these rope straps. I think they look a little bit more stylish as well too. Especially when I'm traveling and I'm doing stuff, I can just kind of throw this around. Great options to get into, but a strap is great. They make padded straps, but it's real easy if you don't have this thing strapped up. If you put it down somewhere, you might forget about it, and then there goes your camera. Have the strap. It's helpful. They even make it with quick releases if you need to get around stuff and take it on and off. Other than that, tripods are great if you need stability. External hard drives as a secondary source if you don't like using cloud-based solutions. Filters. We didn't talk a lot about filters today. We don't really talk about filters at all during my classes. But if you have specific questions on filters, I'm more than happy to answer that. Lenses. Additional lenses. As you grow and you get bigger into your camera, you should really start to learn about the lenses that you're getting and what you should be getting next. And classes and workshops. That actually should be my 6th most important one. Continue to be a forever student of photography. I've been shooting photo for 20 years now. I learned on film cameras. I've been through the digital age now, and now I talk about it all the time. It's my bread and butter that I have. It's always going to change, and this is not the first iteration of this. AI is becoming more and more useful in the camera world. My camera that I'm using to record right now is an AI tracker. Does it always work? Not necessarily, but it still does the job. The camera industry is always growing and changing. You should be a forever student of photography, and you'll always be on top of the new trends, the technology, the color science, whatever it might be. Last quote I leave you guys with, and then it's open for any questions that you might have. But the bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price is forgotten. I cannot stress this enough. Photography is a crazy game. I went to art school. I had a kid in my class who would paint with Heinz ketchup, and the work was unbelievable. Some of the best stuff I've ever seen. The smell was rancid and terrible, but the work was so cool on how he was able to use water to dissolve ketchup and make it look like a paint. The camera world is not as forgiving. If you buy a bad camera, it's going to look bad. There's ways to dress it up and to play with it and to have fun, but at the end of the day, invest in what you want. If what you want is out of your reach, then continue to work for it. Don't compromise. Don't move to something else because it's a better price or it's this. Get something that works the best for you, for what you're doing, and you'll never regret that. When it comes to photography, too, there's substitutes all over the board. You can look at one camera brand. They offer this product, and it's $300 cheaper. Does that necessarily mean that it's better, or is it going to meet your needs? No, and that's an important thing to remember. So the bitterness of poor quality remains long after the sweetness of a low price is forgotten. I stand by that quote. Take a deal when you can get one, but also don't be afraid to say no and work and save until you can get what you want. That's all I have for you guys today. I think I pushed it to, almost to 7 o'clock. Typically the classes run from 5:30 to 6:30, so that way there's 30 minutes of question times for you guys. But next Thursday, which is going to be, stand by, February 12th. February 12th next week, we are going to do the intermediate camera class. All the things I said we would talk about next week is what we're going to focus on. So this is where we talk about the exposure triangle, aperture, ISO, and shutter, how they're all completely separate, and then also how they all come together, especially for the manual control. We'll talk a little bit more about other controls and buttons like white balance, focus my brain's all over the place. We'll really start to get away from automatic. That's the main thing we should be focusing on next week. So practice until then. Become more informative on there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Call me, email me, whatever's easiest. I'm here every day except for Tuesdays and Sundays. Any questions?
I don't think so.
Okay. It's a lot to take in at first. Photography, there's a lot of aspects to it. I think we spoke on the phone yesterday. You still don't? Yeah, okay, I was going to say. When you have time, take a look at everything. If there's a photographer out there or somebody Exposure triangle will be nice. Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of talking about the exposure triangle. I think it's a really important thing to get used to, especially after you've learned automatic and now you're ready to start the next side of it, which is the manual control. So very excited for you to see it next week. Yeah, there's so many different cameras that you can go for. I think the biggest thing is, number one, always price point. What do you realistically want to do here? And then the last thing I would do is take a look on and see who else is doing what you're thinking of. That's a great jumping point because for the most part, depending on the level of camera you go for, almost all of them are identical. Some people specialize in this better than others. Like Canon, for example, people love Canon because their color. They say the Canon color is unbelievable. Nikon, people love the glass, and people like the customization that they have. Sony is the video king. Sony is the best for low light performance. I have a couple friends who do like, not promotional, but like for, events, clubs, special things, where they'll take photos of people when they're in and out, and they have all the crazy stage lights going. Sony does a great job of capturing images while it's sporadic like that. Every brand does something a little bit differently. There's not one brand I would say overall, but the big three, Canon, Nikon, Sony, those are the ones I would probably recommend to look at to get started. And price range, something that's better than the iPhone but not breaking the bank, I would probably put you at that 600 range and then upwards. Yeah. Realistically, I think 7 and up, great. You're definitely beating out things like the iPhone 17 or the iPhone 16. But yeah, it's all dependent.
I was going to ask you if you have any current photographers that you like, that you would
not necessarily.
I really know old school stuff.
Yeah, I really don't, unfortunately. It's funny. I have these guys on YouTube, for example, what we're filming this on right now, who have great informational videos on how to use and the technical side of things, but I've never seen their actual work outside of it. But they answer all the itching questions that I have in the back of my head of how do you switch that setting and why would you want to switch that setting, that kind of stuff. So I don't have one guy that I could recommend. It depends. I'm trying to think. What's a good way? It sounds silly, but if you pop into like an art museum or something where they have photography, a lot of the times you'll see names and stuff, and you start writing those down. Those are great. Or a photography book gives you good ideas of what you're looking for.
So I feel like I know what I like, but it's all probably not on film.
That too, and that's a tough one.
So I don't know any digital artists, I don't think.
If film is something that you're interested in, there's 2 brands. One I don't carry, that's Fujifilm. Fujifilm gets fantastic reviews for their color science, and they can do simulation on there that makes it look like film. I love this Nikon that I use. This is the Nikon ZF. And the reason I did this one is that, let's see if I have enough juice on this guy. Yeah, so it has a really nice color science to it, but it has these filters that I can switch between, and it has a customizable black and white switch on there. So it's stuff like this that I really liked, but I love the color on here and how you're able to manipulate it. So if I press that I button and I go over here, I can then change the tone of my image. And it is a filter, but for the most part, it's a really nice portrait. It really doesn't look like you're just putting an Instagram filter over the image. So I'm a big fan of the Nikon cameras and the brand. The products are easy to find too, so it's not like you'd be kind of stuck looking for it. And they're a well-known name that's been around for a long time. If you're interested in doing video, I might recommend Sony a little bit. Sony gets great reviews for that aspect of them. Their 67 or their 6000 series is a good entry level without screwing yourself over for a future upgrade. So it's a good one to get used to. The lenses are fantastic. You can keep upgrading those, but then you've got something that'll last for at least a good 10 years. So,
okay. Yeah,
a lot to think about.
No, I don't want to take up anyone online's time.
Oh, you're good. No, they can chat or ask questions if they have them, so you're fine.
I studied film photography back in college
a
long time ago, and I have time to pick it back up as a hobby.
Yeah.
I already know film. Well, it's been a long time, but I want to modernize
Yeah.
what I know and get up to speed on current digital photography. And I like technology and cameras, so editing and stuff is.
Yeah.
I'm
100%.
excited to get to that stage and stuff like that. So but I haven't picked up a camera for anything like that in like decades.
All the cameras downstairs are charged, so you can always, that's the nice part too, come on in, pick stuff up. As you start to research and write stuff down a little bit, we can pull out lenses for you so you can see what specific lenses look like on there. But yeah, is video at all an interest?
I mean, I have 2 kids, so
Okay.
maybe
Yeah.
they're going to get into content creation at some point.
I would then,
Careless.
for sure, then I would probably stick with Nikon or Canon. I think that you'd benefit from either one of those two. I would gravitate towards Nikon, especially if you like the film aspect. I think that they are very close to like a film feel.
Yeah, okay.
But Canon's color is fantastic. I think the science behind Canon's great too. So I think either one of those would be a great option, and you can get something that can be like the middle tier, but you can also get something entry level. So again, just depends.
Yeah, I am, since I told my husband I wanted to pick back up photography,
Yeah.
I'm going to get a bonus in April, so
Very nice.
the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
But I don't want to just buy the most expensive camera.
100%.
Like I'm a frugal person by
Yeah.
nature.
Yeah.
But I really want like the best quality that I can upgrade for years.
I was gonna say, I think then getting a good lens and then getting a nice either like mid-tier body would probably be the best way to go with that. Something that'll set you up where it's like the next 10 years, the next thing you need to worry about is the next lens that you want,
Right,
type of
that's
situation.
exactly
And I think that's where, yeah. So, when you're ready.
Cool. Yeah, I'm getting there. All right.
Well, fantastic to meet you. Let me open the door for you. I'll head back over here with my sickly self. I'm trying to be.
I appreciate it.
I'm trying to keep away from. I feel terrible about it. But I'm like, I can't miss a class. Got to power through it till.
That was really awesome.
I trust me. There's only a few times I've had to miss them, and it's always a bummer when I do because I know that the next day I'm going to hear about it. So.
Well, I appreciate it.
Of course.
How did you end up doing like photography for the plunge and all that?
My uncle, his best friend, started it back in 2002. It was like a joke. They were like, let's raise some money. We'll just give it to a charity. And then the following year, one of their family members actually had a really bad, like medical bills came up for cancer. And they could not afford the treatments, any of that stuff. So they were like, what if we did a fundraiser and we'll expand on what we did the year before. So 2003, they all jumped in. They did the same thing, raised money for him. And then it ended up being great. The next year came around, he didn't need it anymore, so they're like, well, can we maybe do the same thing and then keep, And so now, in the last couple of years, I've been involved for about a decade now. But when I first started, it was about 3 families. Now we get up to a little under 100,000 every year that we raise. So we pick 5 families throughout Chicago or throughout Illinois, and we donate the money towards them. And it could be, for example, we had one, the little boy was diagnosed with a condition where his legs and his motor skills were just completely gone. The parents couldn't afford the medical chair, the fancier chairs, so I think 20,000 of what we raised went to buy that chair for this child. Stuff like that where it's like, it makes a huge difference for their lives.
Amazing.
We have one kid, he comes back every year. Unfortunately, he couldn't come the last year because it was he had work. His name's Nicholas. He's one of our stars that we show every time. When he was 11, he needed a heart transplant, and we paid for the medical assistance for that. Since then, he's I think 17 or 18 now, and they didn't think he was going to even make it that long. So,
That is so cool.
and
You
then
can see the results.
you
of
see
your work.
exactly. And on my aspect of it, all I do is I stand in the water. I've got waders on, and I got my camera, and I'm like,
Freezing your ass.
please jump faster. I don't want to be here anymore. 30 minutes of
Not
just
ideal
cold.
photography
No,
work.
but it's a lot of fun. I love it. So, exactly, yeah. I'll tough it out.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you.
Of
I'll
course.
see you next week.
Yes, awesome. Can't wait.
Very informative.
Thank you. Wow, I'm glad. Ooh, all right, I think my camera disconnected here. Hold on, people. Uh-oh. Did it disconnect? Why did it disconnect? Well, anyway. All right, well, you guys can still hear me, so I'll end the class there. Thank you guys for joining. Thanks for being here. My name's Saxon. I teach these classes every Thursday from 5:30 to 7. Usually 5:30 to 6 usually, or 6:30, but in this case, we're here till 7. So people, if there's any comments, questions, concerns, you've got my information. Contact me any point in time. I'll be here next Thursday, same time, same place, so please, if you have anything that you need photograph-wise, let me know. As always, everybody, keep shooting, and I'll see you all next